Hi, and welcome to our latest installment of Divorcing Dilemmas. If you don't know me, I'm Amanda Porter with Porter Law Office, and every month I like to interview a different expert who has some information to share that may be helpful for people who are going through a divorce. So this month we have Christine Ruehling from All About You Recovery Counseling. I can't talk today. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, thank you for inviting me, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, as you may have guessed from the name of her business, Christine helps with recovery counseling. And I thought it'd be great to talk to her because whether we like it or not, unfortunately, substance abuse and substance addiction can be a big factor in family law, both leading to divorce and then after the fact trying to figure out custody and parenting time. So, Christine, one of the things I wanted to talk about, a tool that we use a lot in family court is the chemical dependency assessment or evaluation. So can you tell us a little bit, I know you do those, can you tell us a little bit more about what goes into that, how that tool can be used?
Yeah, so the chemical assessment, the chemical health assessment is a standardized tool that is used. It's a standardized assessment, so it's the same questions that are used every time. It's used to evaluate the individual's use of chemicals and to determine whether or not they qualify for a substance dependence, substance use disorder, and if so, what type of services they may qualify for treatment to help them with any substance use issues that they may have.
Okay, great. And what are some of those treatments that you sometimes might recommend or say that they qualified for?
Yeah, so those levels of care vary. So it's the ratings that they get are kind of on a matrix. So the scores, it's a scoring system, and it ends up. They can come out with different levels of care that may be recommended, and that can range anywhere from maybe no recommendation if they have very limited use, all the way up to long-term inpatient. But most of the time, it ends up being more like counseling, individual counseling. It could be a outpatient treatment that might be recommended. It could be inpatient treatment, and like I said, sometimes it could be a long-term inpatient treatment program that might be recommended. So it can be anywhere along that spectrum depending on the type of use that they have and how long they've been using and if they've had any services in the past.
That makes sense. So if they've previously tried outpatient, perhaps something more involved becomes necessary. Okay, that makes sense. And when you're going through that process and evaluating them, one of the hallmarks of addicts or people who are chemically dependent can be that they're in denial or that they kind of underplay their use. So how do you deal with that when you have someone who's, it's not a problem, I only drink once a week or, whatever?
Yeah. So part of the assessment is set up so that there are numerous places where we ask similar questions to kind of draw out some of that information so that throughout the assessment, we ask kind of the same questions in different ways to kind of pull some of that out. One of the benefits of maybe me doing an assessment over maybe another assessor is I am a person in recovery. I've been in recovery for 9 years. And so I can kind of read between the lines sometimes with somebody who is maybe in a little bit of denial because I can pick up on some of those things and can ask or reword a question or maybe dig in a little bit deeper. But then part of the assessment process also includes collateral calls. And it's a requirement of the assessment process. So a assessment is not considered valid unless collateral calls are included in that assessment. So that means that I have to make at least one and sometimes up to 3 collateral calls after the assessment and talk to somebody that knows the person that I'm doing the assessment on to verify the information that they have given to see if I get a similar story or I'm getting the same or different information. And that information then is included in how I rate my information at the end. So it's included in the final recommendations.
Great. So it's kind of you have some ways to draw it out of the person themselves, and then you also kind of verify that with people who have observed his or her substance use. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And I know one last thing I wanted to cover. I know we met previously and discussed this. A lot of my clients are looking for assessors who can take their insurance, and I understand that. We all want to save money. If you're going through a divorce or custody battle, that's expensive. You have some caution about that, right? You're not sure it's always the best idea. Is that correct?
Yeah, so one of the things that I recommend for people when they are getting assessments or even seeking out counseling or treatment for chemical health is to really think about whether or not they want that information to go through their insurance or not. Because chemical health, as anything that we run through our health insurance, it will become a part of your permanent record. And it's something that, do you want a substance use disorder if it's diagnosed? Do you really want that to become a part of your permanent health record? Because it will follow you everywhere. And some insurances don't even pay for it. But do you want it to be a permanent part of your health record? Because it will show up with electronic records these days. It will follow you and it will show up everywhere that you go if you end up with a diagnosis of it. So I caution people to think about that, to make an informed decision. Do you really want that to follow you? And some people decide that, yes, that's okay with me, or some people just don't have the financial means to be able to go any other way other than using insurance. But my whole goal is just, it's not necessarily that I try and tell people don't use your insurance, but I want people to be able to make that informed decision.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, when you say it follows them, you mean medically, correct? So they're doctors, but not other insurance companies, not, it's just still confidential. But just to clarify, and I think that's a great point. People might save some money in the short term, and it might end up costing them more in the long term if that diagnosis is following them. So it's just like making an informed decision. That's something I never would have considered before you mentioned that to me. So that's why I did want to bring that. So for people who are, like you said, finances matter. People don't always have the money. If people are paying out of pocket, what's a ballpark about how much an assessment might run them?
A ballpark for what an assessment might run, depending on where a person goes, depending on which treatment centers, or if they go to a private practitioner, anything like that. They go to the county, if they qualify for county fundings, anything like that can run anywhere from, I believe some practitioners are charging maybe about $150 if you're going for county or some facility places, anywhere up to if you're going to health insurance and you're paying independently, it can be up to $350 or so. I'm about middle in the range.
Okay, so you're looking at a couple hundred to several $100s perhaps, but not necessarily thousands of dollars. So this is something that people may be able to afford on their own and should think thoughtfully about.
Yeah, I would say probably the high end would be about $300 that somebody would pay. And I charge generally about $250 depending on the situation.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, and I do.
People just like to know, approximately how much something is going to cost, because all those can absolutely add up. And then we're not going to go into this as much detail, but then in addition to doing those assessments, you also offer counseling for people who are struggling with some addiction, correct?
Yes, I do individual counseling, and I can also do, I can do individual counseling for the person who's struggling themselves, and I also can do some counseling and support for individuals that are living with somebody who has an addiction. So I can do it for the codependent individual as well.
Great.
And I can do a few sessions with a couple or a family, but I can have extended sessions because I'm not a family therapist, but I can do a couple of sessions to support the addict.
Just to focus on the actual addiction and substance abuse, not anything wrong. All right, awesome. Well, if anybody watching this has need of Christine's services, whether for an actual assessment or for some of that counseling, her contact information is either below or to the side, depending on what forum you're watching this on. So is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the assessment or anything like that, or do you think we covered it pretty well?
I think we've covered it pretty well. I can't really, the only thing that I would say, maybe that I would like to say, is the assessment process has changed a little bit. Legislation changed July 1st. A lot of places are still using what was traditionally called the Rule 25 assessment, which is a really, really long assessment. And beginning July 1, it's now called, and we can start using what's called a comprehensive assessment, which is a much shorter assessment tool. And as an individual practitioner, not all places are using it. It has to be implemented by 2020 across the board throughout the state. As an individual practitioner, I'm using it. I've begun using it because it's a much shorter tool. I've added a few things to it in my individual practice, but I'm using the shorter form. I'm not using the big, huge, long one. So if somebody wants to, do a little bit of a shorter evaluation, I'm doing the comprehensive assessment rather than the real long Rule 25. So.
All right, sounds good. So somebody to definitely ask whoever's doing your assessment about which version they're using if you're doing it before. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Christine, and for sharing this great information.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks. Bye.